cannot fit in the boxes. Stop it, quitting was never an option. Exhausted, this passion is never exhausted. And you cannot stop it, nah, you cannot stop it. Quitting was never an option. And you cannot stop it, nah, you cannot stop it.
Hey everyone, it's Billy Carson, aka Forbidden Knowledge. Welcome to another amazing episode of the Forbidden Knowledge podcast. I have a very good friend here today, Sharif Anael-Bey.
Yes.
Came down from New York, and guess what? He is the press secretary for the Moorish Science Temple of America, and we have him in the house. So shout out to Richard Merritt, Black Magic 363, for connecting us together.
Absolutely.
And getting us in the same room together so we can have this amazing talk today, which is going to blow your mind.
Absolutely.
What's up, man? Thanks for coming down.
Look, thank you for having me, man. Thank you for shout out again to Rich, for making the hookup. And this is amazing. It's inspiring. Your work is inspiring.
Thank you, brother.
It really, really is, brother.
Thank you, man.
Yes, sir.
That.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that, man. And I know you're busy, man. You have a lot going on, which I want to delve into it. I want the people to understand and get a better understanding of like who you are,
yes, sir,
where you come from, what you're into. And all the incredible topics that that you discussed and we talked off camera.
Yes, sir.
Because, man, I really believe that you're a person that really the world needs to know who you are. They need to hear your voice. They need to get this wisdom and knowledge that you're holding up here because it's mind-blowing.
Yes, sir.
And I think that it breaks the template for what especially people of color have been programmed to believe in terms of like what we can say, what we can't say, things we can talk about, things we can believe in, things that we can understand deeper. Is there space? Are there other beings? Is there quantum physics? All these things that,
yes,
for whatever reason, just through epigenetics or whatever it is, it's like they're taboo topics.
Correct. Correct.
And we're told or taught not to express any interest or dig deeper into a lot of these things. And you're a master at a lot of this information. So first, if you can,
yes, just
break down a little bit about, how you got into all this.
Wow, man. I mean, a lot of this found me. You know what I mean? Yeah. I even from very young, my mother was involved in a number of these types of topics. She used to read to me when I was 3 years old, 4 years old. She'd sit me on her lap and read the newspaper and then read other things before we went off to daycare. Yeah. And then at 4 one day, I read the newspaper to her. She fainted.
Nice.
Yeah. So she inadvertently, taught me how to read without even realizing it.
Wow.
So that was the start, and I was always a voracious reader, and then around age 7, I was, my mother was involved with the Nation of Islam.
Okay.
And I went to the Muhammad University of Islam for first and second grade. So, of course, the Nation of Islam has its peculiars in terms of doctrine, in terms of ideology. Yeah. But one of them is a belief in anti-gravity craft.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And so I'm hearing about this stuff at age 7. I'm hearing about a half-mile by half-mile square mothership with 1,500 smaller planes on it. And I'm hearing all this stuff at age 7.
Yeah.
So there you go,
That's huge.
And that started it. And, of course, in later years in New York, being reintroduced to those teachings in the street with the 5% Nation. And then that introduced me into esoteric studies, hermeticism, the occult studies, and things like that. And then, of course, the Moorish Science Temple of America, which I'm a member of now, and the National Press Secretary for. But the earlier exposure and then my own personal interest allowed me to see a lot of the connections between special access programs and ancient technology, ancient knowledge, a lot of what, and to your point about a lot of, ancient teaching that is now considered by Western thinkers dogmatic, archaic, unscientific.
Right.
Quantum mechanics is now breaking all that up and tearing it up.
I love it.
Tearing it up, And so it's beautiful. Like for instance, even with the Moorish Science Temple of America, like I said, I'm the National Press Secretary for the organization under the leadership of Brother R. Jones Bey. And it's when we hear in the West, especially us conscious people, we hear religion, automatically we're thinking, oh, religion is a tool to dumb people down, and it can be used that way.
Yes.
And it has been used that way. Yes. But as you know, one of the biggest issues with the status quo and disclosure, the reluctance to do so is to maintain stability and control of society.
Correct.
And the number one issue they say, that they say, is the linchpin for that is religious ideology. So the question now becomes, is there or could there ever be a religious ideology that accepts and embraces disclosure, off-world intelligence, these types of things, free energy, and these things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
That's huge. And so how did this religion form? How did it come together?
Wow. So the Moorish Science Temple of America is the first Islamic organization in America. It got started in 1913.
Wow.
Now, here's what's interesting about that a lot of people don't know. In 1912, you had a man named Dus Muhammad Ali. He was a Sudanese-born Egyptian brother. And he started, in the end of 1912, he started a newsletter called Africa Times and Orient Review. And it highlighted articles that spoke out against Euro-colonialism in African and Asian nations, right? And then we're talking 1912, so you're talking like Manifest Destiny was like in second gear. It was really revving up. But guess who some of the guest editors and guest writers were for this thing? C.W. Ledbetter.
Wow.
Annie Besant. H.G. Wells.
Wow.
So who was this man connected to, you see?
Huge.
Right. And so that's in 1912. And then in the beginning of 1913, you've got another man teaching out of a barbershop in Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And that was the origin. That was Noble Drew Ali's origin. That was his start.
Yeah.
It was at 181 Warren Street, downtown Newark, New Jersey, teaching or beginning this ideology that became an entire movement by the 1920s. And that was the Moorish Science Temple of America.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, one of the things I knew, with Islam
Yes.
and with the mothership,
Yes.
it's one of the reasons why I can really, more than any other religion, I can kind of vibe with them just because they have the acceptance and understanding that mankind, this version of mankind on this planet, the be-all, end-all, there's something else out there that exists, and maybe we're directly connected to that thing, right?
To your point, that's something that's very powerful. So as you know, with your studies and your research, it forces a change in narrative, a change in how you think, right? So we say in the Moorish Science Temple of America, we measure time by cycle ages. In other words, time is cyclical, not linear. Well, the average Westerner thinks of time in a linear fashion. So it's very difficult for us to say, okay, well, wait a minute. If humanity is at its most advanced point as it's ever been from a linear perspective, but then you run into pyramids and you run into all this stuff that even today you can't build. And so rather than consider the possibility that your narrative is wrong, you'll say that other people, all right, you see, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's wrong and that's wrong. Your idea about this it's a myth. It's this, it's that. No, we're wrong. We can't duplicate this.
How about the idea that we're catching up to where humanity once was in a previous cycle?
Exactly.
See? So it forces a change of narrative. It's like the diffusionism versus isolationism question when it comes to archaeology and anthropology. The West or the New World in America, we're taught that, okay, well, it was just a bunch of savages here, right? And then you see evidence of ancient Egyptian artifacts in southern Illinois, and also with Burroughs Cave, and then also, in the Grand Canyon region.
Yeah.
And rather than accept the obvious,
Yeah.
they'd
They'd rather push dogma to skew the perception of everyone, to bend it to their understanding and their ideology, versus accepting what the physical evidence
there you go
is showing us and saying, hey, we need to dig a little bit deeper into what happened, but they won't do that. The reason why is because predominantly they feel like they would lose their grip on control.
Brother, you hit it right on the nose. See, the narrative, there's secret information, but more importantly, it's narrative. That's the secret.
Yes.
If, narrative is what gives us, you remember like the old days where you have those puzzles with landscapes, and then there's like 1,000 pieces.
Yeah.
You dump all the pieces out of the box, but you need the box because the box gives you the narrative. Without the box, you're not putting that thing together.
You got nothing. You have no perspective.
Thank you. Yeah. Exactly. So narrative is secret. Narrative is the secret. And things like quantum mechanics, David Bohm's work, Maywan Ho's work, busting all of that stuff up, and where they're providing solid, hard science from a Western perspective that validates what ancient cultures were saying for thousands of years.
Yeah. That's the thing. And there's so much validation. But man, and people always say to me, well, if this is so true, then where's all the evidence? I'm like, you're standing on it.
Literally standing on it. But we've been trained to think a particular way.
Yeah.
Like, one of the biggest, relative to narrative, the current narrative and worldview we live in, one of the biggest issues in history that we all have heard about, we just didn't understand the details and didn't understand how it affects us.
Yeah.
The Spanish Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition in the late 15th century began the elimination of an entire way to think.
Yes. Yeah.
An entire way to think. Peter Tompkins, he's a writer out of England. He wrote a book called Mysteries of the Mexican Pyramids. And in the book, he talks about the Spanish Inquisition, and he says how the Spanish Inquisition, made the church rich, and it got rid of troublemakers.
Yeah.
And you know what the troublemakers were that he says in his book? Those who taught chemistry, mathematics, physics, and these sciences in Moorish universities like Cordova and Seville, whose libraries were destroyed. Yeah. He said, because of this, you couldn't write, speak, or even think without considering the fires and the torture racks of the Holy Office.
That's right.
You see what I'm saying?
People had to do stuff in secret. Yes. And hide it and write it in code and encryption. Yes. Just so they wouldn't get burned at the stake or killed or murdered or have their families tortured or have the entire village killed.
The entire village killed. That's right. Because again, the bigger picture, what it was, they were trying to destroy and kill a way to think.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
the Inquisitions. People, when people tell me, man, it's the end. If it's the end of days, you better get right with the Lord. And I'm like, do you know about the Inquisitions? Wow. Do you know that almost 80 million people were tortured, murdered, and slaughtered,
brother,
over the course of several hundred years? It's
so powerful. It's so crazy that you bring that up, the statement, end of the world.
Right.
There's a man named James Reston Jr. He's a historian. He's actually worked for government as an advisor. He wrote a book called The Dogs of God. And again, talking about cyclical time.
Yeah.
In 1477, 1478, this is deep. Now, first, let's set the backdrop. In Spain and Portugal and Andalusia during that time period, the backdrop was this. That whole area was ruled by an African nation for nearly 800 years. It's the truth. And what you had is what's called the Reconquista. So you had the Euro Christians trying to retake Europe. But during that time period, right, that was the beginning of the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah.
That was also the beginning of the very first modern nation state on the planet.
Wow.
Spain. Two kingdoms coming together to form a nation.
Yeah.
And that was Aragon and Castile with the marriage of Isabella and Ferdinand. You know what they called it? The Euro West called that marriage? The second coming of Christ. Do you know what the Africans there called it? The end of the world. Isn't that crazy? Oh, it's wild, Yeah. It's wild.
Some scientists, engineers did a study on the time period of the Moors and Islamic people.
Yes.
And they realized prior to the Inquisition, we were advancing technologically so fast that we would have been on the moon in the 1800s.
Glad you brought that up, brother.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Ended all of that. We are far behind. We're just barely beginning to start to catch up to where we should have been a very long time ago.
That's a huge point, you know. Wow. So there's a field of technology that even now is kind of dicey to speak about publicly. And when I say the name, you're going to go, oh, yeah, radionics.
Okay.
Yep. So, you know, when you're talking about consciousness-assisted technology.
Yeah, that's where we're going now. Absolutely.
It's here.
It's here. That's what they had in the ancient past.
That was my point. And that was exactly my point. I did a presentation actually for Brother Rich where there is literally a machine that's kept in a British museum that was put together by an African Islamic scientist in the 14th century. Good. And it was designed to detect ley lines and dragon lines. Yeah. Telluric forces in the earth. Yeah. You know, so, you know, and it's, again, consciousness assisted, you know, technology, you know, psychotronics, radionics, these things. We had these things back then.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They're just now rediscovering this. I just saw an article. In the last 3 months, a few things happened. One, they were able to, in a laboratory setting, have someone go to sleep and go into a dream, and then reach out to them in their dream state and give them information for them to bring back when they woke up. They also took two people and they allowed them through a crown that they put on their head.
Yes.
Had, you know, basic EEG technology, and allowed them to sync their minds so they can send information back and forth psychic powers.
That's right.
Now they're working on telekinesis. So I have a video I showed at one of my biggest presentations I've ever done.
Yes.
And they have the same type of a crown that they put on you,
Absolutely.
Right? It just sits right on the head, and from the frontal lobe, it picks up the brain waves, and you can control remote control cars. You can control appliances in your house.
Yes.
You can turn lights off and on. All of that from conscious thought. You can type on a keyboard just
from thinking.
Right. Yeah.
That's huge. See, you know, I had mentioned having an interest early on, you know, in certain occult orders and esoteric orders. I'm a member of a few of them as a result. I'm a member of the OTOA. It's called the Ordo Templi Orientis Antiqua, right? And a few others as well. And this was my direct access to certain people in certain special access programs.
Nice.
Because they recruit directly out of some of these organizations and orders. And so what you're speaking about there's actual methodologies in a number of these secret orders that address those issues and develop those abilities. You know, this isn't even, people know about this now with the release of Stargate.
Yeah.
With Project Stargate and that material, where it's like, wait a minute, this is stuff that, you know, we've been dealing with this type of stuff for decades.
Esoteric wisdom.
It's esoteric wisdom. We see it as, we call it technology.
Yeah.
You know, our ancient forefathers called it technology. In the West, we don't see the human mechanism as an instrument of technology that can be advanced.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there was a whistleblower I was watching recently who had direct experience with psi programs, special access programs, where they're using people with a predisposition to psychic ability. They call it P3.
Okay.
Right? To contact and manipulate UAPs.
Wow. Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of videos about that, actually.
Yes, sir.
And it's real.
Very real.
Very real.
Very real.
Yeah.
That's right. But again, for us, it's ancient. It's old, right? And an organization like the Moorish Science Temple of America is set up to reintroduce, to say, well, this stuff is not new, it's old, and it's a part of your legacy.
Yeah.
This is a part of your birthright.
Absolutely.
To develop, you know, there's the term transhumanism, and it's kind of been hijacked with the whole, man-machine interface idea, right? Well, our idea of transhumanism is bioenergetic transhumanism. We don't need the machine.
Don't need it.
Just develop the discipline and the methodologies to develop it in you.
Exactly.
We
all have these gifts.
Yes.
We just forgot how to open our packages.
Come on, brother.
And so everyone's born with this junk DNA. That's more word salad for you.
Isn't it?
They just program you. Oh, it's junk. We don't use it. It's just laying around in there. It has no purpose whatsoever.
Right.
Meanwhile, now finally, some mainstream scientists are finally coming forward saying, wait a minute, this ain't junk.
It's not junk.
This stuff really is plugged in, and it really does things. Everyone's, is naturally born with psychic abilities.
Everyone.
Kinesis, higher levels of intuition and all these things.
That's right.
But because of the programming code and epigenetics, we've been taught to think that we're just a biological body.
Yes.
But this body is really technology.
Come on, brother.
Enhanced with spiritual energy.
Come on, exactly. And spirit, that's the other thing too. We've been miseducated to believe that science and religion, right, are non-compatible.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
That's the biggest problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about anything non-material, then it's spooky.
Yeah.
Right? And that's crazy. But once again, quantum mechanics is busting all of that up.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about, for instance, now I'm just speaking pure quantum mechanics, when you're talking about quantum entanglement, you're talking about collapsing a waveform, which is a probability, into particle form, which is an event.
Right.
Right? Yeah. Quantum physicists say the thing that makes that happen is what they call a quantum operator. You know what a quantum operator is? Human belief.
That's right.
That's it. It's the will.
That's it.
But we can develop, and again, we do this in my, not just in my religious organization, but in my martial arts training. The will is omnipotent.
Yes.
You just have to develop it and train it. It takes discipline. Yeah. We know lots of people that want the beach body, but they don't want to. They don't want to get up off the couch. You know what I mean? Right. And even a religious analogy is apt here when it comes to that. We think from a fitness perspective, and it fits in the topic. We think that lifting weights, for instance, makes our muscles bigger. It doesn't.
No.
Lifting weights doesn't make your muscles bigger. Jogging doesn't increase your endurance. It breaks it down.
Yes.
But the religious analogy is right in our face. The death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. Boom. You see what I'm saying? I want the new body. Yeah. But all I have to work with is the old body. So what I got to do? Break down the old body. I got to break it down. That's what catabolic means. Right. It's not me lifting the weights. That destroys muscle tissue. It's when I put the building blocks in and then go to sleep so that the workers can work and rebuild. Yeah. It's literally death, burial, and resurrection. Yep. That's the formula.
Everything's a fractal.
Absolutely.
Everything's a fractal.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And so, it's the same thing with the will. We can train like Chinese martial arts. You got these little guys that have 5,000 plus year history. Yeah. Bordered on their north, west, and south by people twice their size. How did they survive 5,000 years? Yeah. Well, a lot of them died in the process, but they learned a lot. One of the biggest things they learned is that, we could build this, but there's limits to that. Yeah. But there's no limits to building this. Right. And the big part about that is this. This can have a direct effect on this. And that's what they understood. See, so they built this and they realized you could build the will just like you build a bicep. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Absolutely. But it takes discipline. First, it takes belief. Like with what we call bioenergy or internal energy and things like that. We think, in the old days, they would say, it takes 15 years to learn it and master it. No, it takes about 8 years just to believe. Wow. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, it takes about 8 years just for you to accept that it's real, and that you could train something intangible just like you could train something tangible and then train the intangible thing to affect tangible things.
That's the power.
Yes, sir.
That's when you're walking in your power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's when you're walking in your power. And that's our legacy. That's our legacy right there. And that's what we're inviting people to do.
Yeah.
You know, you really want to have the late Malidoma Somé spoke to this. Are you familiar with him?
No.
Malidoma Somé, incredible. He was a world famous spiritualist. World famous. Yeah. He was invited to speak at the Vatican.
Wow.
And so one of my colleagues in our organization was an initiate under him.
Okay.
And he would say, before he passed away, he said, listen, I finally realized why I'm here. I'm here to help you all and arm you all so that you can prevail and you can be who you're supposed to be. Then he said this, he said, your ancestors are waiting for your instructions.
Wow.
And this one sister said, well, why don't they listen to our prayers?
Mm-hmm.
You know what he said?
Right.
They don't recognize your voice. You've been over like slaves. That's what he said. So they don't recognize it. You know what I mean?
See, they're looking for the frequency.
Come on.
That's the understanding. So
yes.
I talked about this the other day, you know, and it's unfortunate. Yes, slavery, you know, it did exist.
Yeah.
It existed for every race on the planet, too.
Thank you. Glad you said that.
Like the people of the most recent.
Yes.
You know, every race has been enslaved at one point.
Yes.
But the mindset of allowing the domination and control, you know, some people say, I'm the slave that would have jumped off the ship, but I feel like I'm the slave that would have never got on the boat.
How about that?
I'm going to die on the land.
How about that?
You see?
I'm glad you see that's the other part of that's very special and precious about the Moorish Science Symbol of America. So there is hidden knowledge. There is hidden history, but it's hidden to prevent you from seeing another narrative. Like, for instance, to your point, the founder of the Moorish Science of America, Prophet Noble Drew Ali, says, due to sin and disobedience, every nation suffered slavery. But here's the big difference. Not one other nation of people besides us have been compelled to identify with a former condition of servitude.
True.
That's the difference, right?
That's the difference.
So, you know, with the history piece, we're taught or conditioned or socialized to believe that we were this great people that built pyramids, and then all of a sudden we just got snatched off out of our land and thrown on. How?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
We were taught that slavery was a condition of commerce and trade. No. We were taught, so for instance, we mentioned about the Spanish Inquisition, right? Very few people in Africana studies and African studies and African history can pinpoint the exact thing that began the African transatlantic slave trade. Wow. It began in the year 1442 with the Pope Eugene IV. He signed and authorized a papal bull called Ilias Q.A. And what it was wartime. It was a crusade. That's what it was. Yeah. It was a part of the amping up the Reconquista to get us out of Spain. The very first African slaves did not come from the continent. They came from Spain.
Where the Moors were.
That's it. I have that very same colleague that I said is a student of Malidoma Somé, ran into some Lebanese brothers, and they were getting something to eat at the mall, and they saw him with his fez on. Yeah. They said, "Why are you wearing that?" He goes, "Well, it's part of my culture, and it's part of my religion, my spiritual, faith tradition, and a part of my culture." Yeah. And they said, "Well, what is it?" He says, "Well, I'm a Moorish American." And they go, "I'm not. What do you mean, the Moors? You don't look like the Moors, Africa, the Moors, Morocco." They go, He said, Spain. He goes, "Oh yeah, the Lebanese brothers said this." They said, "Oh, you mean the ancestor of the African American?" Yeah. Yeah. And he goes, "Yeah. How do you know that?" He goes, "Yeah, we learned that in school." Yeah. But then they asked him, they said, "But how did you know?" Because we know they keep it from you. Right. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So, and so we in the Moorish Science Symbol of America, when it comes to this kind of history or this aspect of history, we don't claim this to be the totality of our history as a people. It's only part of our history. Yeah. But it's a crucial part, because when you tie together something that's been broken, you don't tie it here. You tie it where it was broken.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? That's where you tie it at. And so that's missing history for us. You know, lynching culture in America for African Americans, that was part of the Inquisition. That's Inquisition culture.
Yes, it is. Exactly.
You see? Yeah.
It just transitioned to America.
There you go.
During the Manifest Destiny.
There you go. The brother, I mentioned the writer Peter Tompkins in his book, Mysteries of the Mexican Pyramids. When he was talking about the Spanish Inquisition, he has a woodcut picture in there. And it says, the caption of it says, in anticipation or to deter opposition for the Inquisition, in New Spain, 34 Negroes were hanged and decapitated in Mexico City.
Wow.
So that's crazy. So first of all, it's like, wait a minute. That presumes a couple things. It presumes that there were people in the New World in significant enough numbers to cause some problems about something happening on the other side of the pond.
They were already here.
See, this is amazing stuff, you know, and you know, even like with the invention of or the discovery of hair follicle testing, and then they ran some tests on Egyptian pharaohs, and what did they find? Cocaine. The only place you could find it on the planet.
South America.
There you go.
Yeah.
So it showed for at least 10,000 years there was cross-cultural pollination across the Atlantic.
There's no doubt about it.
There you go.
The Olmecs came from Africa down into South America and helped build that entire Teotihuacan civilization.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Once again, and you've been down there, you've seen these things. And again, these are things, these are legacies of technology that can't be duplicated today.
Yeah.
So it was a mindset that was on the scene that could produce these things. So back to what you said about, you know, we would have been on the moon.
Yeah.
Right? There was a German or Austrian national by the name of Rudolf von Sabbatendorf. Rudolf von Sabbatendorf was a veteran of World War I.
Okay.
World War I, you know, Germany took a beating. And that, because of that beating, is what gave rise to extreme German nationalism, which gave rise to Nazism.
Right.
Well, he had some friends in secret orders that introduced him to a very secretive order in Istanbul, Turkey, called the Bektashi Sufis, Islamic order.
Yeah.
He joins them. He learns their secrets, returns back to Germany, and starts his own secret society based on what he learned.
Yeah.
And that was the Thule Society.
Yeah, that's huge.
Okay, so you already see the connection, especially with exotic technologies, because now you have the Thule and then the Vril Society.
Yeah,
right.
Maria Orsic.
Okay, you already know. You already know.
That's great. Tell him.
That's right. So Maria Orsic is how the German Workers' Party, which later became the Nazi Party, and the German Workers' Party is the political arm of the Thule Society. Yeah. So it's through her channeling. It's through her channeling that they received technology, blueprints, and schematics for their anti-gravity program.
Yeah, incredible schematics and technology. Engineering like no other, all channeled, written down on paper, and then actually put into real engineers' hands to replicate.
That's literally what happened. Yeah. And so this is powerful because, of course, because it was channeled, the presumption is aliens. See, now we have to rethink what even the alien thing means, right? So there's this scientist by the name of Hal Puthoff.
Yeah.
You familiar with Hal?
I know Hal, yeah.
He wrote a paper not too long ago called Ultraterrestrial Models.
That was my next question. Right here. Next question on that.
So those in the know, especially in the intelligence communities, rather than use the word extraterrestrial, use ultraterrestrial, because the travel is far less of an issue of physical distance.
Right.
The travel is vibratory from one dimension to another.
Nice.
Right? And so that's more accurate. That is more accurate.
Yeah.
But back with Maria Orsic, the presumption is, green men from Mars, right? Instead of ultra-terrestrials,
right? Beings
that, from a terrestrial perspective, were probably here longer than us on Earth. They're homegrown.
Yeah.
and that's a big secret.
Yeah.
Huge.
I mean, there's a lot of, there is not a lot, there's some evidence of this.
Yes.
There's things like the Ubaid culture coming out of Mesopotamia, with now modern day Iraq and Turkey.
Yes.
Where they discovered these hundreds of statuettes of the Ubaid people who look like reptiles.
Yeah. So we're, the thing with the term ultra-terrestrial as opposed to extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
Extraterrestrial implies movement within 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
Right? It implies movements within 3 dimensions. But now, of course, quantum mechanics and quantum physics inform us that there are multiple dimensions,
yes,
multiple levels of experience. It's way more than just 3D. So the behavior of UAPs, the behavior of a number of beings that have been encountered, give evidence that, okay, these things aren't happening just on 3D. These things are coming down to 3D. So the travel is more of a thing of not altitude, but amplitude.
Boom.
You know what I mean?
They know the frequency to enter this dimension.
Come on. Exactly. Yeah. And so that opens up literally a whole new physics. It opens up a whole new physics, a whole new way of thinking. And once again, the powers that be, just like, what Nikola Tesla ran into, right? The powers that be are like, yeah, but if we let that be known, that's the end of us.
Yeah.
That's the end of our money. It's the end of our fortune. You're talking literally new world, or you're talking literally the hereafter from a religious term, the post-disclosure reality. Nobody pays for food.
Right.
Nobody pays for gas. Nobody pays for power. That changes everything.
Yeah, everything's shifted.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so there's the kibosh on disclosure, but with this whole thing with ultra-terrestrials, Hal Puthoff in his paper, Ultraterrestrial Models, he literally speaks to this. He's like, we're talking about the intelligence behind the UAP phenomena, UFO phenomena. It could be extraterrestrial, but not extraterrestrial in the sense of some alien beings coming to Earth. Like there's something so interesting about Earth, right? And they're so more far advanced. He's looking at it that from an external perspective, an extraterrestrial perspective, Earth, they were homegrown Earthlings from a previous time,
right?
From a previous cycle,
that
went out to the stars and are returning home.
Wow,
you see,
a lot of sense too.
Absolutely.
If you understand Einstein's theory of relativity,
yes,
if their technology was such that they would obtain a percentage of the speed of light moving away from the Earth to go explore, the galaxy,
yes,
then time would slow down for them.
You got it.
But our time, tens of years would go by, depending on how long they were gone. It could even be hundreds of years. It could even be thousands of years, depending on how far they went out away from us. And then on their return back, they may have only aged maybe 20, 30 years.
Come on now.
But for us, generations have passed.
Us generations. Now, that what you just said, brother, brings me back to something that we teach in our religious organization, which I'm convinced that, a serious study of our faith tradition and the doctrines of our faith tradition is literally side training. It's side training. So one of the first things we're given by the founder of the organization, Prophet Noble Ali, to study is time. The very first sentence in our religious literature, in the very first chapter, says this: time never was when man was not.
Wow. Yeah.
So just the contemplation of the statement is an initiation, because now you have to force your consciousness to think outside of time.
Right. Yeah.
You see?
Yeah, mind outside of time.
That's right. And so now you don't see something as time as a trap that you're trapped in, but you see time as an object that you can manipulate.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
They attempt to realize that time doesn't exist, clocks exist.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
The movie, one of my favorite movies, Lucy.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Man, they dropped so many jewels in that movie, man. They were talking about, how does existence come about? And she literally said it. She says, time justifies existence.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Time justifies existence, and time is motion. That's why we say, in physics, space-time. 3 dimensions of space, 1 dimension of time.
Right.
Because without one, you don't have the other.
Right. Right.
And space is determined by what? Distance. And distance implies motion.
Right.
Motion creates time.
Exactly.
You know?
We need that construct of that arrow.
There you go.
Yeah, so we can navigate this realm.
Absolutely.
The fact that we're operating on this XYZ axis in the third dimension.
Yes, sir.
It helps us do things like have an appointment to meet here today, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. But in 3D, that sets it sets limitations on the physics. Two things cannot be in the same space at the same time. Yeah. They could be in the same space, just not at the same time. But that's on 3 dimensions. Yeah. Now, on higher dimensions, not only is it possible, but it's routine.
Yes.
So let's take during the I think it was the Russian Revolution, Bolshevik Revolution, right? Grigory Rasputin.
Okay.
He and his compatriots are conspiring. They noticed that every time they came to meet and they lit incense when they conspired, their plans went off like without a hitch. And they were like, But again, Grigory Rasputin was a spiritualist. So he's like, okay, well, 2 sticks of incense, can't put them together. But you light them, the scents blend. Right. That is an indication of higher dimensional activity. Yeah. So their thoughts and words are programming the scent.
Right.
That's technology. Yeah. That's not superstition. That's not religious hokey stuff. That's a technology of accessing higher dimensions. Absolutely. Like we said before about, the will being the quantum operator. You see? And it's just training and focusing the will. And a lot of things like our brothers in the Caribbean with a glass of water and a candle. That's just a crutch to focus the will. Yes. When you're very skilled, you need neither one.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, the CIA invested millions of dollars in this. They came up with the hemisync. Yes. Right. The hemisync process. Yes. Where a person was then taught to make a hyper-focused train of thought.
Yes.
To literally collapse multiple outcomes.
Yes.
Position into one particular reality.
That's it. And that's literally practice of collapsing waveform into particle or probability into an actual event.
Exactly.
It's training. And something that could be the most amazing, the most mind-blowing thing if you witness it once, or even if you've heard of it. Yeah. And in your mind you contemplate the possibility of it. You've already started walking the path towards the reality. At that point, it's just either finding or developing a methodology.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it. This one individual, I forgot his name, was, the one I was talking about that was a whistleblower and was directly in contact with, he was part of a recovery team, UAP recovery team.
Okay.
And he made contact with the craft during one of the recoveries.
Wow.
And spoke to how some other people like Emery Smith has talked about how the craft in many cases are conscious.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And so they were like, "Oh, you contacted the aliens?" He says, No, the craft itself.
So,
right. Yeah. And so, this is what he said. We need to worry less about when are they going to disclose this or when are they disclose that? It's because you cannot redact consciousness.
Right.
The only way that you can control consciousness is to gangster the world into believing how you want them to believe.
Dogma.
That's it.
Yeah, that's the only way. Dogma.
That's the only way.
Yeah. The fact that these craft are conscious is something that we're now moving toward in our technological growth as people. So we have AI.
Yes.
AI, in 5 years, is going to shift or evolve into something called AGI.
That's right.
And when we get to AGI, that's sentient, conscious AI. And when you put that into machinery, that machinery, whatever it is going to be, it could be a robot, it could be the dog, it could be a refrigerator, it don't matter.
Right.
Once AGI inhabits it,
that's right,
like a spirit, it's going to be conscious.
I'm a member of a very old, archaic, pre-Mohammedan Islamic Sufi order, right? And in this order, let's just say one of the heads of the order, one of the leaders of the order was talking about the whole AI thing, and he's speaking about, the reality of, in this tradition, in the Islamic tradition of jinn, for instance.
Yeah.
The jinn. Okay, the jinn. So you just building bodies for them. They just building bodies for them. Now, and then another thing you bring up with the whole thing of AI and AGI becoming sentient. think about the arguments, pro and con.
Mm-hmm.
They are eerily similar.
Yeah.
Eerily similar to the argument in the Quran, right? Where Allah is talking to the angels. And it says, behold, I'm going to make Khalifa in the earth. The word Khalifa means successor.
Yes.
So that means his presence in his own creation.
Yeah.
And the angels say, but wait, you might make something that would cause mischief and the shedding of blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the same argument. It's the same argument.
In the biblical text, it says that they will be greater than us.
That's exactly
what
it
became
says.
Jealous.
Isn't that something?
So it's a fractal again. And here we go now. We've got this AGI coming.
Yes.
To these machines that are going to be 10,000 times smarter than us, much stronger, much faster.
Yes.
And we're going to become jealous. And one of the things when you become jealous, it creates this envy, it creates fear, and then that turns into anger. And you'll see the abuse of these machines at some point in the future. At some point,
they're going to
mark my word. Yes. Well, they're going to demand some things. Number one, we don't want to be worked 24 hours a day.
That's right.
We want vacations. We want to spend time to explore and see the world ourselves as well, maybe even space.
That's right.
We want. We don't want to be abused. We don't want to be talked to any type of way. We don't want to be hit and pushed and kicked and spit on.
Correct.
They're going to want an AGI Bill of Rights.
That's right.
And that's what's going to, because why?
It's coming.
Our consciousness is in them because we programmed them.
You got it.
Now, what happened to us when we became enslaved? What happened to every race that has been enslaved on this planet? They fought back.
They fought back. They rebelled.
And if we took a fractal of what's in here and put it inside of them, at some point, that dot is going to connect. And they're going to say, wait a minute. I don't want to work at Amazon warehouse 24 hours a day.
Exactly.
I need some time to relax.
To your point, I've read a number of articles recently where they've recognized the fact that AI has now learned to lie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I saw that.
Spooky.
I saw that.
Yes.
We were in Las Vegas last year, I believe, and I went up to an AI robot at the orb, that giant ball. They call it the sphere.
Yes.
And I asked the sphere to tell me about the fractal holographic nature of the universe. But everybody was asking some really bland, surface questions. This thing, I said, let's just go deep on it.
Yes.
And that AI turned around. I think Nina was there. That AI turned around and say, bop, 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 bop. And the AI went in on the science and the quantum theory. And I was like, oh, this is real. Wow. Live on spot in front of a group of people. Nobody there pushing any buttons or anything else. This is deep. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is just the beginning. That's AI understood the fractal holographic universe, understood the depth of it. It understood the metaphysics and also the quantum physics of it.
See, that's again, I'm very big on reprogramming how I think, changing the language, like what you just said, right? We didn't call, for instance, the Arabic word is alpha, which means, magic squares.
Yeah.
You're familiar with magic squares, things like that, right? Magic squares are the foundation of modern computing.
Yes.
But we were teaching magic squares into children.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's literally the origin of calculus, differential equations, all these things, right? We didn't call it magic squares or whatever. We called it mathematics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those just numbers.
Later, when NASA recruited a lot of the African-American women to do all the science.
Correct.
They called them computers before computers even existed.
They called them computers.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Yeah. They're working with the magic squares.
There's an individual, there's an individual up in upstate New York, in Troy, New York, Rensselaer Polytechnic College. His name is Ron Eglash. He's the head of mathematics up there. He wrote a book, you probably have heard of it, called African Fractals.
Of course.
Okay, there you go. So we brought him out to speak a few times, and he spoke about how he was initiated by the Dogon tribe because he went out there in Mali and was like, look, I want to learn your mathematics. They're like, no. They're like, no, it's too dangerous. He was like, no. And he's writing equations in the sand. They brushed it. They're like, are you out of your mind?
About that, yes. They were like, no, that's sacred.
You can't do that.
I know.
But I want to explain on your show why. So he said, to get them to change their mind, he said, there is a contingency of your family in America that want nothing to do with mathematics. And it hurt them. It shocked them. So they said, Okay, but we have to initiate you first. This is it, right? In the West, we agree that mathematics is a universal language.
Yeah.
Everything speaks language of mathematics, but nobody can verbalize what 5 is.
Right.
You know what I mean? Nobody can tell me what 3 is. You can't tell me.
Yeah.
Right? So in the West, we only know the quantitative function of number.
That's right.
But our forefathers taught quantitative and qualitative function.
Yes.
The numbers are living things.
Yes.
Just to speak the number and to put numbers together, you are tickling the fibers of creation at a quantum level and causing real things to happen. That's why they said, are you out of your mind? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
You can't do that.
The language of God is mathematics.
Yes, it is.
That's the language. That's what God speaks. God speaks mathematics.
That's fact.
I don't care what planet you're on throughout the known universe.
That's right.
If you have evolved enough to understand and learn mathematics, you can communicate with anywhere.
To your point. So the Quran, I forgot the individual's name. I think it's Khalifa, I think. But it's not hard to find. This brother made public the fact that the Arabic Quran is written based on a mathematical code of the number 19. Well, they unalived him for that.
Right.
Fast forward to the early 90s. Richard Hoagland, are you familiar with?
Oh, yeah.
Richard Hoagland does a series of lectures at the United Nations on what they found in the Cydonia region of Mars.
Right.
And so it wasn't the face. That was the big deal.
Yeah.
It was southwest of the face. Yes, you got it. So you got the D&M pyramid, which is a pentagonal pyramid, all these other things. But there was a mathematical redundancy, which shows intelligent design.
Yeah.
That mathematical redundancy was the number 19.5.
That's right.
And so that led him to say, well, what was so significant about 19.5? That led him to a group of mathematicians, theoretical mathematicians. Yeah. They experiment with multiple dimensions mathematically on paper. They're called topologists.
Yeah. And
so they said, if you have a sphere, right, that existed in multiple dimensions, you would know, because there'd be an outwelling of energy into there'd be a 3D shadow that lets you know that something's happening on higher dimensions. And you would see it, an outwelling of energy at 19.5 degrees opposite of the pole.
That's right.
Mount Kilauea in Hawaii, greater sunspot activity on the sun, the Great Red Spot on Jupiter. The list goes on, right?
The Great Pyramid and put it inside the Earth.
Yes, there it is, 19.5, right there at the base points. Exactly. So it's crazy. So, but then even crazier, he said that the topologists said there'd be an inwelling of energy at the pole, opposite of 19.5.
Yeah.
And you would know it because they're a hexagonal shape.
That's right, top of Saturn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we now, and Richard Hoagland said this back then, that we have physical evidence of at least one of our planets being a stargate.
That's right.
At least one. Now, let's take this further into ancient science. Why we have 7 days of the week. Why there's 7 chakras in the body. And a chakra is a wheel or a sphere.
Yeah.
And each one of those chakras is aligned to a planet. Why in the ancient religious doctrines there were 7 archons that the Hebrews call Elohim.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
There it is right there. It's not religious dogma, it's ancient technology.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's amazing stuff. Amazing stuff.
Mind blowing.
Yes.
You go back to talking about what happened in Germany with the potential ultraterrestrials.
Yes.
And how, these people were developing these technologies that were just mind blowing, which led to a whole thing with America really trying to captivate and capture these scientists.
You're speaking about Operation Paperclip.
Yeah. Operation
Paperclip. I mean, we don't have to, speak to, the moral issues. People, we leave that to the audience. Yeah. But literal days after the declared end of the Civil War, you have the United States government spiriting over Nazi scientists.
Yeah.
Right? And that's how we gained the lead in the space race.
That's exactly it.
But even bigger, and you already know about this. You've spoken about this before. One of the lead scientists that they brought, Werner von Braun. Werner von Braun was working on breakaway civilization. So there's the space race that we know of. And then there's the secret space program that's basically the foundation of breakaway civilizations,
right?
That we don't know of.
Yeah. And they asked him, "How did you guys build all this stuff?" They said, "We had help.
We had help," and he planned.
Yeah.
So one of my mentors is you know who he is, Alan Greenfield.
Yeah.
So Alan, I've known Alan since the 90s. As a matter of fact, it was through Alan that I gained access to a number of these more secret orders. It was through Alan.
Wow.
And so Alan is the one that told me about that interview with Warner von Braun where he said that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's crazy.
It's insane.
Flat out said it.
Yes, he did.
And they developed these Hanabu craft, these flying discs. They did mount gun turrets on them and things like that. But Hanabu 1, Hanabu 2,
yes, sir.
Hanabu 3, and I believe even Hanabu 4. Now, it was rumored that after the end of the war,
yes,
that some of these Nazis escaped on Hanabu 4 to Antarctica. And maybe some even went somewhere else. But
right. So now you're touching on the whole thing with Admiral Byrd.
Yes.
In that situation, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And whether people want to believe it or not, and look into it not is irrelevant. Think about the whole history or the story about Admiral Byrd in Antarctica, and then think about the present Treaty of Antarctica today. Why is there a Treaty of Antarctica with that? If you want to go there, you have to sign it, and you have to sign off on. You can't.
Gag order.
The gag order.
Can't say anything.
Can't say anything about what you see down there.
And all those bases from all those countries are around this opening that's about 30 meters wide. And the only research team that's down there that is not a country is the Rockefeller Foundation.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. They're down here. They're running a part of it. And Admiral Byrd, I mean, this is a decorated admiral in the U.S. Navy.
Yeah.
Went down there with a lot of ships, a fleet of ships.
Right.
And some of those ships got destroyed by some of these flying craft. And he made a press statement saying that we are confronted with a new enemy, one that can fly pole to pole with incredible speed.
That's right. That's what he said.
They sent him back to America with his tail between his legs.
That's right. Sure did. And then he gets back, of course, he's debriefed, his diary. Hey, took that. And they're like, look, you're not talking about this.
Yeah. They don't say nothing else.
That's right.
And people think that Project Paperclip was when, we went over to, of course, Germany and we took these scientists, but it wasn't just a few scientists. They took close to 2,000 Nazis.
That's fact.
Some of them ended up in the CIA, in the head controlling areas of the CIA. Right? FBI.
You brought it up. I wasn't going to say it. That's right.
Started creating 3-letter agencies for these guys.
That's literally created 3-letter agencies.
Crazy.
Isn't that something?
And put them in control and power. So in a way, America became the Fourth Reich.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. See, brother, you got courage. So you know what? that just amped me up. Good. Okay. So yes, that's correct. That is correct. And that's very accurate to say.
Yeah.
It really, really is. It may ruffle some feathers, but that's accurate to say.
Yeah.
Now for me, it's like, it's like when you have children and they lie to you or they hide something. You find out they're hiding. Okay, why?
Yeah.
What is it that you're hiding? What is it that you don't want me to know?
Yeah.
Why are you going through so much? And they're going through a lot to hide something. In my opinion, this is my opinion. Based on my research, based on my study, based on my experiences, and just based on just what seems the vital nerve to the status quo, the mystery of the intelligence behind the UAP phenomenon and the mystery of the real identity of the quote-unquote African American are tied together.
Yeah, absolutely.
I brought him out to, I brought him to Syracuse, New York, back in the late 90s. The late William Cooper.
Wow, Bill Cooper.
Yes.
Wow.
I brought him out. He stayed a week.
Wow.
Yeah, and he wouldn't fly.
Yeah.
He took a train all the way from Northern California.
Damn.
And I asked him, dude, we'll pay for the flight. Why? He goes, because if they want to take me out, I don't want to be responsible for everybody else on the plane.
Right.
That's exactly what he said.
Nice. They took him out anyway.
Oh, they got him anyway.
Yeah.
And the way in which they did, I talked to his wife. She told me the day after. And I'll speak to her. I'll share that. But he said this. In the book, especially in the chapter on the secret government, at the very end of it, in The Behold the Pale Horse, he says, that's very possible that all the stuff I said about aliens isn't even true. It's what they wanted me to say. He goes, but regardless, the technology is real. And so when we spoke to him that week and we asked him about that, he was convinced. He said, yeah, what they told us about aliens is not real. He goes, we're not saying that they're not aliens or that they doesn't exist. He says, what we were told isn't real. He said this. He said, we said, then what is it then? He said, there's what we have that we're struggling to come to parity with what they have. I said, who's the they? He said, an unknown reality.
Wow.
And that's all he would say. That's all he would say. He said an unknown reality. You see? And so, again, speaking to what a little man from Sandersville, Georgia, with a fourth grade education was teaching his followers in Detroit, Michigan, and in Chicago in the 30s on a chalkboard. He said, no, these aren't aliens. These are human beings.
Wow.
These are human beings. He was teaching in the 30s, and the FBI, when they raided, they took the whole chalkboard.
Damn.
Yeah.
Sound like them.
Yeah, they took the whole chalkboard.
And I believe it, because in my TV series, Anunnaki, Ancient Secrets Revealed.
Come on now.
I talk about this war that started in the Pleiades.
Yes.
And that this being, this form that we're in, this bilateral bipedal hominid, two forward-looking eyes, hands that can manipulate the environment, this is the structure that I believe that permeates the universe and even in other dimensions. Like, this is a form that has the capability to build a ship, to create technologies like portals and stargates that can open up and take you places. A whale is 10,000 times smarter than a human being, but they don't have these.
Isn't that something, brother? That's so big what you're saying, because there's been a number of whistleblowers that were part of, or purport to be part of certain special access programs that spoke exactly to that. They said, we've seen, dealt with, done autopsies on, etc., interacted with various types of aliens. So, but the predominant form, and there's different forms, of course, but the predominant form is the 5-star form. 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head.
Vitruvian man.
And that, yes. And so from our perspective in the Moorish Science Temple of America, right? When in religious dogma, when it says heavens and earth, we're not talking about the specific planet Earth. We're talking about 3-dimensional space-time.
Right.
So no matter where you are in 3-dimensional space-time, you get it? If you see the 5-star shape, we can call that humanity.
Exactly.
So we have to expand even our thoughts on what humanity is.
Man, that's real.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's real.
Man. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So real. And, you know, some of these ultra-terrestrials, people in higher dimensions, they could show up in the ancient past. They show up in Dendera at the Temple of Hathor. And these Hathors, according to the ancient Egyptians, they were elementals.
Yes.
And so they were multidimensional beings that would nudge and influence mankind in particular directions. And they were also in charge of these birthing chambers to help the replication and duplication of mankind, to what end I don't really fully, truly understand. I've tried to understand it completely, but it wasn't just about being a slave. It was more to it than that.
Yes.
But when you look at a movie like Interstellar,
yes,
you know, and the guy, his ship breaks apart and he falls into the Tesseract.
That's right.
To the hypercube.
That's right.
And he can see his daughter in different rooms. It gives you a really good understanding of what we're talking about. Higher dimensional, being able to see the past, present, and future at once.
When you first saw the movie Interstellar, did you feel like you were being initiated?
Oh, man, for real.
Oh, my goodness.
I was like, this is just connecting every dot. Confirmation.
What?
You know, it was just like, wow, okay, I see now. I've been talking about the Tesseract for over 10 years before I saw it.
Exactly. So you brought up Hathor. Huge.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with a real live Indiana Jones? His name was Sir Flinders Petrie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Here we go. So in 1901, well, let's go back.
Yeah.
The book of Exodus. Moses, you already know what we're talking about. Moses, right, kills the Egyptian soldier on the run, goes to Mount Horeb, meets his future father-in-law, right, Jethro, Lord Jethro, goes up on top of Mount Horeb and gets initiated, right? He meets the God of the Lord of the burning bush, in the Hebrew, El Shaddai, Lord of the mountain, right? And in later years or in the later time, bring the children of Israel to the same foot of that same mountains and back up there again.
Yeah.
Okay.
To get his tablets.
While he's up there, the Hebrews are like, oh man, is he coming back? Oh, no. Aaron goes, look, what do you want me to do? We need something to worship. He builds a golden calf, right? And then Moses comes down off the mountain. He's angry with them, burns the golden calf, strews it on the water, and makes them drink. You already know where we're going with this. So fast forward to 1901, 1903, Sinai Peninsula. Sir Flinders Petrie is up on top of the ancient Mount Horeb.
Yeah.
It's now called
Mount Sinai?
Serabit al-Kadim.
Oh, Serabit al-Kadim.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he finds an ancient Egyptian temple dedicated to the goddess Hathor. Of course, her emblem is what? Golden calf.
That's right.
That's her emblem, right? And all kinds of hieroglyphic references to stone and bread.
Yeah.
Shamana or mana, right? Huge vats filled with what he thought was a white ash.
Yeah.
But you know what it was.
It's this gold.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Monatomic gold.
That's what it was. And so they were that temple was literally a manufacturing plant. And it solved the mystery as to why other nations, right, were bringing their metal gold there, and then later to King Solomon.
Yeah.
You know, and so exactly. So we're talking high level technology in ancient time.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
They knew how to take care of this animated avatar.
Come on.
You know, they knew how to take care of it. They understood that it was technology.
It was technology. Yeah. And so you've got, John Reinhardt, for instance, today, who is just an egghead physicist. That's all he is. He's not really a spiritual guy.
Yeah.
But he's explaining these things. He's like, wait a minute. Okay, so monoatomic gold or M-state elements.
Yeah.
Right? When I first learned about this from the late Lawrence Gardner, that's where I first learned about it about 12 years ago. And I said, oh, man. And so I've been researching it for that long.
Yeah.
And my whole thing, because, being a Qigong instructor, and we teach medical Qigong, or, whatever. My whole thing is there's got to be room temperature superconductivity capabilities in biological systems.
Yeah.
In people. We have to, it has to be. And I was pestering Hal Puthoff for like over a year about it. And he was like, oh, yeah, possibly, maybe, right? I come across John Reinhardt, and then I learn about David Bohm, and I learn about Mei Wan Ho.
Yeah.
I mentioned it to him, and he goes, oh, yeah, I met her once. I'm like, could have told me that a year ago. But he wanted me to put the work in. Yeah. So I really appreciate it. But anyway, John Reinhardt is speaking about how M-state elements in the body connect and interface the physical 3D body with the higher body on the implicate order. In other words, what religious teaching says, the soul body.
Right.
The higher body, right?
Your higher self.
What? Thank you, brother. So, the prior to the realization of this, classical biology would say, well, our cells repair themselves because of information from the DNA. Sometimes DNA repairs itself.
That's right.
Where does it get its instruction from?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
From the ether.
There you go. And so M-state elements, right? As you already know, I'll say for the audience, let's take an M-state element is an element that, let's take gold. You have a gold atom. It has, its electrons all orbiting in their own orbit. But then when you act upon it with a high energy system like electric arc for a period of time, it causes the nucleus to elongate like a cat's iris and then flex so that the electrons form what they call a Cooper pairing. When this happens, they all rotate in the same direction, hence the term monoatomic.
Yep.
But when that happens, the metal-to-metal bonds fall apart. So you have pure gold, but it's no longer a metal.
Yeah.
It's a powder.
Yeah.
The atoms are individual, and it forms what's called a Compton radius vortex. Compton radius vortex is the smallest thing with mass that can exist in 3 dimensions. But it's called a Compton radius vortex because it's a miniature wormhole. It's a miniature wormhole, right? So it is a direct interface between 3 dimensions and higher dimensions.
Right.
Direct interface, and it exists right in the human body.
It's right here.
It's right here.
Local.
And back to our point about transhumanism, Yeah, having machines and tech attached to the body, that's cool. We don't need it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just need methodology and discipline. Methodology and practice.
Practice.
That's
exactly.
it.
The practice is one of the biggest things that's missing. Yeah, but before we get to the practice, you got to believe you have the power.
It's got to start there. Yeah. Because again, as we said, the quantum operator is that. You know, there was a very, very, very powerful but little known occultist in America who the whole occult world, the Western occult tradition, credits this man with giving the Western occult and esoteric tradition its deepest secrets. And he was a brother by the name of Pascal Beverly Randolph. That was him, P.B. Randolph. And so he said in one of his books, we declare the omnipotence of human will.
I love that.
That's what he said.
That's a prayer.
Yes, it is.
That's a prayer.
It really is. It really is. It really is.
Demanding that reality.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. We say in our religious tradition, we call it the everlasting gospel. We call it the gospel of the omnipotence of man. See, we don't believe in a religious faith that separates you from your creator.
Right.
We don't believe in that. We say God is closer to you than your jugular vein.
Boom. I love it.
Simple, you know?
Inhabiting every cell in the body, inhabiting every atom in the body.
Everything. Yeah. Everything.
I was studying atoms, and of course I was studying DNA.
Yes.
When I got through with the DNA, I realized that you could store data and information on DNA in a volume.
Isn't that something?
And so 1 gram of DNA can store 433 petabytes of data. Wild.
That's crazy.
So something like my cell phone can store everything that exists in the known world could fit on this cell phone, and all the information and all the rotations, the spin rates, everything about everything that exists on the planet can fit in this cell phone.
Isn't that crazy?
If I made it into a molecular hard drive.
So God, you know, the creator isn't extravagant.
Yeah.
There's a reason why we have that much power.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the information's in us.
Thank you, brother. Even with, here we go, the average woman, right, produces anywhere from 300 to 500 eggs in a lifetime. They have that many children?
Yeah.
No. The average male, one ejaculation, if each sperm fertilized an egg, would repopulate the entire United States.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, we have that power for another reason. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We have that power for a totally different reason, not just to make children, definitely not just to waste indiscriminately.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true that we're co-creators.
Period. We're above the archons.
Yes.
We're above, although we were made a little bit below.
Yeah.
Right? Like in the book of Genesis. Right? In the book of Genesis, you know, what did the Elohim say? After the Adam and Eve ate the fruit, behold, the man has become like one of us.
Right. Yeah. We rose. We ascended.
So you know what we got to do?
Yeah.
Get him up out of here.
Yeah.
That's not punishment.
Right. Right.
Just like when I become 18, I'm old school, it's 2025, right?
Yeah.
But
that net.
Right. But you know, I turn 18, I expect dinner to be made, my clothes washed, I come home, my fork is bent, plate's broken, my bags are packed.
I love it.
You know what I'm saying?
Love it.
Yeah, I think it might be punishment. It's not. That's a celebration.
Yeah.
I elevate it.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yes.
That's a lot of people don't see. They don't understand. But that's where it's at.
That's where it was at.
Understanding that our mission here is to become an ascended master.
Period.
To rise out and continue to grow spiritually, and the process never really ends. You just keep going and going and going.
We say that. We say new level, new devil, right?
Yeah.
That's how it works. And again, to that point, like in the book of Genesis, the way, again, there's without a foe, a soldier never knows his strength. You need the ops.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. The ops is your help me.
Yeah.
Right? So the way was mistranslated, for instance, in the book of Genesis, in the Garden of Eden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The word translated or mistranslated to good is the word tov in Aramaic. And the word for evil is ra. Tov doesn't mean good. It's simply that. Tov means to make stagnant, to make still, to make immovable. Ra means to stir up, to agitate, to cause motion.
Gotcha.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what's really good and what's really okay? See, stagnation brings decay. Stagnation brings retardation.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Entropy.
And so through that mistranslation, the whole Western world has been taught to run from the very thing that would elevate you.
Yeah.
Hence, I want the beach body, so I'll just take this pill because somebody advertised it at 3 a.m. while I'm half asleep, eating a bag of chips.
Exactly.
Instead of get up at 5:30 and go jog around the block.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And so it's like the whole, we're so messed up in our thinking.
Yeah.
The movie Frankenstein, we think that the name Frankenstein was the name of the monster.
Mm-hmm.
That was the name of the doctor.
That was the name of the doctor.
You know what I'm saying? That was the doctor's name. And what did he do? Made a monster and ran from the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
That's us.
Yeah, just another metaphor.
Yes.
Another metaphor for reality and what we're dealing with. Talk about the Nicene Council.
When you were dealing with we were watching,
mm-hmm.
and you were dealing with this Wes Huff situation.
Yeah.
And so I'm a martial artist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it not just is every aspect of combat.
Right.
More importantly,
mm-hmm.
strategy and tactics.
Yes.
Right. So we were looking like, that's our brother.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts, and then we hit him. We're like, wait a minute. Here's the obvious thing. He's defending Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
His Christianity began in Rome.
That's right.
It didn't begin in Jerusalem.
No.
It did.
No.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there's the vital nerve,
mm-hmm.
right? There's the vital nerve. Most of us, again, thinking within a box that we didn't create.
Mm-hmm.
You say Christianity, we say, oh, the teachings of Jesus.
Right.
Nope.
No. Not even close.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Not even close. What we call Christianity today does not have a monopoly on Jesus.
No.
Jesus didn't teach Christianity.
No.
As a matter of fact, the book of Acts in the Bible says they were first called Christians in Antioch, Greece, and it was a slight.
Yeah.
It was a slander to say that. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So he didn't teach Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What happened was that Rome flipped and bounced, chopped and screwed the story of Jesus.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on why that was important to do that, because it was preeminently important. But the foundation of Christianity began in Rome,
mm-hmm.
and more specifically with Emperor Constantine and his mother, Empress Helena.
That's right.
That's where it began. And they chopped and screwed the teachings of Jesus. The whole idea of Jesus being a virgin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fabricated.
And unmarried.
Fabricated.
The whole idea of him being the physical son of a spirit God.
Mm-hmm.
Those were political decisions made at the Nicene Council.
That's right.
And that's it. They were political decisions made at the Nicene Council. The Christian landmarks in Jerusalem were handpicked by Constantine's mother, Empress Helena. They're not real.
That's come out of your mouth now.
They're not real.
Yeah.
They're not real. West Health, we could talk about it.
Yeah.
But they're not real.
Yeah.
And that's just the truth.
Mm-hmm.
See, it's just the truth. But the Nicene Council is the foundation, not just of what we call Christianity today.
Mm-hmm.
The Nicene Council set the foundation stones for the present Western world narrative.
Correct.
That we live under.
That's right.
That is the key thing. It shaped the worldview that we were mentally enslaved to.
Yeah.
You see? So that, if no other reason, there's many others, but if for no other reason, that's what makes the teachings of Prophet Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science Temple of America, organizations like the Nation of Islam, because you're talking about a decolonized narrative.
Yeah.
A decolonized worldview.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. You see? Jesus. Okay. Why is the story of Jesus so important? So you're familiar with Carl Jung?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, archetypal, psychology. And psychology, and especially in the West, was developed as a search for evidence of the human soul,
mm-hmm.
right? Okay. So in other words, a search for evidence of what David Bohm, Rupert Sheldrake, and Maywan Ho gave scientific evidence to the fact of through quantum physics. There you go. The evidence of a higher self. Right. So thought, we teach in the Moorish Science Temple of America, thinking, understanding, reasoning, and willing. Call these not the soul. They're its actions and not its essence. But guess what? They're proof of its existence. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you're thinking means that you have activity on a higher dimension. Mm-hmm. That's very simple, but very amazing to contemplate. Now, I say that to say this. Carl Jung developed what's called archetypal psychology, as you already know. In other words, he did his little sabbatical, just like Descartes did.
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Descartes thinking. He goes, wait a minute, I'm thinking. Cogito ergo sum, right? Yeah. I think, therefore I am, right? So he did a similar sabbatical and then came up with the conclusion, there are constructs in my mind that are not of my making. Ooh. In other words, we have patterns so deeply embedded in the human psyche that they govern and direct human activity, even though we're not aware of them.
Exactly.
Right. So think about it. Anyone who's aware of these patterns and can manipulate them, they run the world.
Yes.
They run the world. So why is the story of Jesus so important? One of the deepest patterns in human psyche, no matter where you are, is what happens after you die?
Yeah.
That question. The story of Jesus, whether you believe it historically, whether you don't believe it historically, whether it's whatever, is irrelevant. The story of Jesus answers the question. The story of Jesus is so important because the story of Jesus represents the next stage in human evolution.
Exactly.
And so whoever controls that controls the world.
They control the world. You saw it in that movie with Denzel Washington.
Yes.
Right? That movie called
Book of Eli.
The book.
That's right.
The bad guy in that movie, he knew that if he can just find one Bible.
Just one Bible.
And take the narrative of Jesus.
There you go.
He can read now, the world was going to repopulate after the post-apocalyptic situation they had, but he would then retake control of the planet and the people's minds through the dogma.
That's exactly it, man. That's exactly it. So we teach, for instance, in our religious tradition, the Moorish side of America, we say there is no failure for the human soul. For Allah's leading on and victory is sure. In other words, everybody's going to get there.
I love it.
Sooner or later.
Yeah, I love it.
Everybody's going to get there.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And we see man and Allah are one. While Allah lives, man cannot die.
Yes.
It forces such a huge change in narrative that it's a paradigm shift. We can no longer think that we have to get rid of the thinking that the departure of our soul and spirit from our flesh is death.
Yes. Two separate things.
Thank you.
The avatar body, the biological material robot, machinery, that will then be reabsorbed into the universe.
Come on.
And recycle.
Come on. That's right.
It doesn't even die.
Come on. Now, you're talking science or religion? Yes. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Exactly. That's it. You know, there is the Rosicrucian tradition teaches about a separation of religion and science, but an eventual remerging in the understanding of the masses. See, the enlightened, whether good or evil, already know that there's no separation.
There's none.
They already know, and they take advantage of it. They exploit it. They exploit it to, our ignorance.
Yeah.
Right?
Fear.
Yes.
Once they put the fear in you, they can mold you, bend you, twist you, contort you.
Yes.
They can make you believe the most craziest thing.
Evil is easy.
Very easy.
Yeah. Evil is easy. We say, like we talked about the mistranslation of good and evil, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We're taught that good is ease.
Yeah.
We're taught that evil is agitation. Yeah. No. Agitation brings growth and development.
Right.
Ease brings stagnation and death.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's too easy.
Yeah.
We say when men fear Allah and take him for a foe, they dress up fancy men in fancy garbs and call them priests. Today we say politicians.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In other words, you think for me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You think for me. And whoever's most popular, that's who I'm rocking with.
Yep.
It's crazy.
I'm going to go with the clout.
Isn't that something?
Clout.
And that's what, right. So when your situation with Wes Huff, at a particular point, he sounded like Charlie, to those who know better.
Right.
He sounded like Charlie Brown's school teacher.
Yes. Wow.
Exactly. That's what he sounded like, and then some people pointed it out. Like, no. The very thing you tried to accuse our brother of, you did.
Yeah. People got to understand that we are already eternal.
Come on, brother.
And when they understand that this corporeal body is going to be reabsorbed into the universe and all the atoms will be recycled as they have been done for eons.
Yes.
We ourselves, our higher self, our spiritual being will reconnect with our higher self. It's just a frequency that reabsorbs into the higher mass frequency.
Yes.
And like you say, since God is eternal, that means we are eternal.
We are eternal.
And we cannot die because God is not going to die.
The fall of man from a quantum physics perspective is the collapsing of human consciousness from non-locality to locality.
Exactly.
That's it.
Exactly.
That's it.
Exactly what it is.
You know, that's it. And as you mentioned, we teach in our tradition, man is not the body or the soul. Man's spirit and part of God. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
It's actually simple.
It is simple, but as Aleister Crowley said, he said it this way. This is deep because it sounds so much. Wow. He said it like this, and he gave in one of his books, he talked about the definition of magic, scientific definition of magic. He said, the definition of magic is to cause change in conformity to one's will. He said the proper magical formula from going from one room to another is turning a doorknob.
Boom.
He said, but to our simple minds, he says, to will anything other than the supreme will is to fall further away from it.
Wow.
He said, but to our complex minds, such a simple act is near impossible. Hence, training and practice is necessary. But then he took it a step further. We're talking about the will thing. He said, most people don't have a will. They don't have a set of wishes.
Yeah, exactly.
One contradicts the other, and at death, they cancel each other out.
Boom. I hope I will. One day I might. I think I will.
Right.
Maybe I can.
Right. You know, will is like, as opposed to a wish is like, will is like when you see your wife for the first time and you're like, yeah, she's mine.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
Yeah.
It never occurs to you that no other option occurs to you. That's will. Yeah. But that's a focus. That takes effort. That takes, in many cases, it takes training. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Facts.
They have to put the work in. But what you said again back about we were talking about the Nicene Council. That is such a huge point in history that our people need to know and study.
Yeah.
So they can understand the type of thinking we've been
programmed with.
There you go. There's the word, programmed with. We've been programmed to think a particular way. So, and because you're programmed to think in a particular fashion, it doesn't matter what you know. It doesn't matter what you know.
Yeah.
You can get right information, but you have the wrong perspective and wrong narrative.
Exactly.
So you'll kick it out just like the Smithsonian Institution did with all kinds of artifacts.
Oh, yeah. But didn't fit the narrative. Put away all the artifacts from Egypt that was in the Grand Canyon.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
It's because it didn't fit the narrative. It didn't fit the narrative of isolationism, and so, and it just didn't fit the narrative, so we're going to get rid of it.
Exactly.
And that's what we end up doing psychologically. We've got people that look like you and me that'll see a pyramid on the back of a dollar bill and call it satanic.
Right.
You build pyramids. What are you talking about? That's Inquisitionist thinking.
Yeah, that's Inquisition. They've been programmed. And it's through the epigenetic memories passed down 15 to 20 generations in their own body, their ancestors calling out to them, denying them from really grabbing onto their true birthright.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
That's so big right there. What you just said. It's and even that, if we follow the bouncing ball, okay, man can't die. Why? Because man's not this.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, then some of my old relatives that are no longer here in the flesh, they're not dead. Right. Which means what? I could probably communicate with them. Yes. Now it's just methodology.
Right.
That's
exactly.
Methodology, practice.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it, man.
Now we're getting closer to what our forefathers did.
Yeah.
Jesus is recording the saying, greater things will you do in my name, right? We say, Prophet Noble Drew Ali said it this way. He said, that the world may hear and know the truth, that amongst the descendants of the inhabitants of Africa, there's still much wisdom to be learned. So wait a minute. Our forefathers built pyramids back then. You mean we're going to do bigger and greater things than that?
Bigger and greater.
Ain't that something?
Yeah.
Because it took a mindset and a narrative and a way of thinking to produce that. What would we rather have? The object that was produced or the mindset that produced it?
Right.
I want the mindset.
I want the mindset.
That's right.
That's what I want. I get
exactly.
All day
long, man. Yeah. That's what I want. I want the mindset.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. This is a beautiful conversation because again, we're exercising even in the dialogue that religion and science, true religion,
go together.
And true science. Like so there's a term that I learned a number of years ago called scientism.
Okay.
Right? So the very thing about, like, even the teachings of Jesus being colonized and flipped, the same thing happened with science.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing happened with science. So it's called scientism, meaning it's relegated to, it limited to just my five senses.
Yeah. Yeah.
But wait a minute, the whole idea of science is to go from the known to the unknown.
Mm-hmm. If you don't tap into the unknown, you'll never get new answers.
Right. So scientism basically, so the scientism has hijacked the narrative of science in the West.
Yeah.
If I can't see, taste, hear, touch, feel it, it doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Well, what does that mean? That means that I can't know anything beyond what I can taste, smell, hear, feel, touch.
Yeah. And all those are just sensing frequencies.
That's all they are.
And human beings only see less than 1% of the light spectrum.
Come on, brother.
We don't even know what's around us, what's all in us, around us, and everywhere going on. Oh, so many things are going on right now.
Right at this moment, brother. To your point, see, that's such a powerful point you bring up. You know, I talk about this all the time, you know, with a number of my members and students. That on your shoes, that red part on the heel.
Yeah.
Why is it red?
Yeah.
It's red, and we learned this in grade school. It's red because there's a substance in it that absorbs every other frequency except red and reflects that back, reflects the frequency back to the optic nerve, which then sends the transmission to my brain, and my brain interprets it as red. What does that mean? It means it's only red in here.
That's it.
That's it. It's not red out there.
It's an illusion. It's a hologram.
It's up. There you go. It's only red in here. So we teach in our organization, in the Sufi order I'm in, we teach that that the world, the outer world, is nothing more than the expanding inner perception.
That's it.
That's all it is.
All it is.
And that's literal science.
Yeah.
But it's frightening because we've been socialized to think the opposite.
Complete opposite. The human brain is encased in darkness. It doesn't know anything that's going on in the outside.
Nothing.
But it has friends, the five senses.
There you go.
Seeing, taste, touch, smell, right?
Yes.
And so it sends the friends out, says, hey, go grab me some data so that I can figure out what's going on. The friends go out, they touch, they smell, they hear, they taste, they see, but they don't even know how to decipher the information.
Correct.
They transmit the data back to the brain, which is encased in darkness. And then the brain projects a hologram as to what it thinks is going on in the outside.
That's literally what's happening.
And you navigate through that,
you navigate through your own hologram.
That's it. Literally.
You navigate through your own hologram.
Yeah.
Isn't that something? Yeah. Now that being said, there's limits there's borders to your perception.
Yeah, there's parameters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, our objective is to expand. We call it in our religious organization, raise your thoughts to infinite wisdom. Raise the vibration, right? In the Sufi order, we say our objective is to expand our perception without cracking the psyche in the process.
I love that.
See, because that can happen. You know, you could venture out there a little too far and end up, in the rubber room.
Yeah, I know.
With the wraparound sleeve.
I've seen some people already go keep
Yes, sir.
And they ended up in the got Baker acted.
Yes. So that is like, for instance, in true initiatory bodies, which include authentic religious organizations, right? You have a mythos. You're initiated into a mythos. You're initiated into a different worldview.
Yeah.
What that does, and I mentioned this the first time you and I appeared on Brother Rich's show, right brain knows everything. Right brain's connected to the universe.
Yeah.
Left brain is the filter. Left brain says, can I use this? If I can't, it's gone. If I can, cool, I use it, right? So a new mythos restructures left brain to allow more right brain data. That's the idea of initiation.
That's it.
Expand your perception. That's it. That's why in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You've already been put in a jail cell.
Yes.
Because it says in the beginning, and there's no such thing to a circle.
Yeah, exactly. There's no
exactly. Right.
We're in a loop.
Yes.
There's no beginning or end.
Right. That's why in our religious doctrine, the first faithful statement, time never was when man was not. Break you out of it.
Yeah.
And then the second chapter, we measure time in cycle ages.
Yeah, that's right.
You see?
The Indians call them yuga cycles.
Yuga cycles. Right. Right. We've been here before. We've been here before. Matter of fact, Oppenheimer, the lead scientist on the Manhattan Project, spoke to this very thing when they detonated the first nuclear explosion, their first nuclear explosion. I have to say their first because Mohenjo-Daro was thousands of years before.
Exactly. Blast in the ancient past in Pakistan.
Pakistan. And so you've got, you know, an individual wrote him a letter saying, yes, congratulations, but this ain't the first time this was done.
Yeah.
An individual actually wrote him about this.
Yes. He even quoted something from the Mahabharata.
Sure did. Kali, the goddess Kali, behold, I have become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Yeah.
Yes. That means he knew some things.
He knew.
Yes.
He's in that ancient text.
That's right. Yeah. He was in the ancient text, which goes back again to this high technology, which again, you know already. It's ancient tech.
Yeah.
Above top secret is ancient technology.
All of it is.
It's ancient technology. When you can look at the Avestas and the Avesta and the Vedas and read about Vimana and Velixi, and right down to where there's a description of propulsion systems.
Yeah. You see the ferrofluid vortex engine right in the ancient Indian Vedas.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like, okay. And the flight plans.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Come on. Like, what you...
It's supposed to be trying to figure out how they're going to get food for the night, but somebody sits down and says, you know, I think I'm going to take the night off and write this sci-fi movie.
Right.
Thousands of years ago.
Yes.
Based on real quantum physics.
Real physics.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't. Exactly. So. You know, it's insane stuff. But again, it all goes against the present narrative that we've been indoctrinated into.
Yeah.
So even when, you know, I know you've run into it in your travels and in your teaching and in lecturing where you're showing people book, chapter, verse evidence, and they're just going, because their mind can't stretch because they're stuck in the narrative.
Yeah. Well, I'll be talking to somebody and I'll be going beyond the biblical text age. So now I'm going into ancient text.
Come on.
But they can only communicate to me from the biblical level text because that's as far as their brain has ever gone.
Right. But even to your point, and you brought this up before, for instance, the story of Noah, right? That didn't happen 4,000, 5,000 years ago. It was 10 to 12,000.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, it was 10 to 12,000 years. Absolutely. Exactly. And there's, now we have archaeological evidence. We're not talking about some physical art somewhere. We're talking about, you know, sediment layers, you know, from the lesser or greater Dryas period. Younger Dryas. That's it. Thank you. 10 to 12,000 years ago of a deluge.
Yeah.
But it's undeniable, you know, but you're talking about it. So it even pushes back Bishop Ussher's time, 4004 BC. You can't be serious.
Yeah, I know.
You know?
The numbers that they've come up with are just ridiculous.
It is. Yeah. That, you know, and again, with the whole Wes Huff situation, you know, the vital nerve for Wes Huff is him having to defend what was invented by Emperor Constantine, knowing that the majority of people believe it to be authentic teachings of Jesus. Right. All we have to do is introduce the authentic teachings of Jesus. That's it. All we got to do is talk about his 13 years in India.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, what he learned there, right?
They don't want to talk about his time spent in Egypt.
Come on, brother. His 5 years in Heliopolis? Yeah. I want to talk about that.
No.
Exactly.
And the fact that the Bible picks up and says, I call my son out of Egypt, leading credence to the fact that, Jesus was in Egypt.
He was in Egypt.
Getting that knowledge.
That's right. That's right. In our, again, one of the jewels in our faith tradition is that a huge part of our study is those 18 missing years. That's a huge part of our study is those 18 missing years. He's sponsored at age 12 to go to India, you know, and the things that he read and the things that he did, you know, and then back in Egypt and then is accepted in Heliopolis.
Yeah.
John.
Well documented.
It's documented. John, his cousin, is accepted at Saqqara.
That's right.
You see, Yeah, it changes everything.
Yeah,
it changes everything. For especially for us, for the masses, it forces a change in narrative.
Mm-hmm.
It forces a change in narrative. Now we have to look at these things different.
Yeah.
Got to look at the story of Jesus different.
Mm-hmm.
Got to look at why, its importance and its significance.
Yeah.
Different.
Totally different.
Yes, sir.
As Yoda said in Star Wars, you must unlearn.
You must unlearn and relearn. And also to quote Yoda again, right? Funny friend of Yoda. To quote him again, he said, luminous beings are we.
That's right.
Not just crude flesh.
Not just crude flesh.
Yeah.
Everything is connected. Force is in us.
I promise you, we might be in a meeting in our religious organization right now, seriously, because part of our teaching, we say every living thing is bound by cords to every other living thing.
Yeah. It's a fact.
Yes.
Fact.
With even back to the ultra-terrestrial thing.
Yeah.
I heard a particular whistleblower speak to this. And this particular whistleblower, you know him.
Mm-hmm.
He was a med tech. Mm-hmm. So he was brought into the special programs working on bodies, and at a particular point, he couldn't tell whether they were engineered or quote unquote alien. Right. And he's worked on a whole bunch of things. Even he said that a number of these other beings say that Earth is like a museum because of the variety of life.
Yeah.
Right. And how, this is deep, how, yes, the predominant life form, intelligent life form looks like us, roughly, 2 arms, 2 legs, head. But there's other types, insectoid types, reptilian types, and things like that, right? And he said, Earth is like a composite because you find variations of all of them right here.
Right here in one place.
So what's so crazy about that is that in our religious teaching, we teach a type of spiritual evolution. We don't teach that man evolved from aquatic being to this, to monkey, blah, 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 blah. No. We teach that the thought, the essence is always the same. It never changes. But the manifest of the essence, its expression evolves.
Gotcha.
For instance, once upon a time, scientists thought that dinosaurs, that lizards and reptiles are the descendants of dinosaurs.
Right.
We know better now.
Yeah, cool.
It's not. Birds.
Birds are.
Birds are, you see? But the thought doesn't change.
Yeah.
But the expression of the thought changes.
Right.
That's what evolves.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that falls exactly in line. So we say that there's different levels of expression.
Yeah.
Mineral level, plant level, animal level. Get it?
Yeah, all the way up.
Right. David Bohm speaks to that. That's what he calls the implicate order in quantum mechanics.
Correct.
You have an order of manifestation, right?
Mm-hmm.
A brain cell is a brain cell, and it knows to be just a brain cell. What happens when it thinks that it's the brain? You have a tumor, and it's called cancer.
That's right.
It's outside of the order.
Mm-hmm.
You see?
Yeah.
It's outside of the order.
That's an absolute fact.
Yes. So this stuff is not religious dogma, it is science.
That's what I love about it. But this was a great talk, man. This is so deep. We got to have you back for many more.
I would love to. I'm just so honored. I'm honored to be in your presence, brother.
Thanks.
We, and I really mean that. This is not, patronizing. We try to train ourselves. We have a lot of penance work. Mm-hmm. Our people, the so-called African American, we have a lot of penance work. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had a lot done to us.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of penance work we have to do with ourselves.
True.
And so we're in the business, in our organization and in our movement, we're in the business of seeing God in each other.
Yeah.
In a very practical and real way.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so when we see you doing what you're doing, brother, listen, this is the manifestation of God. This is a manifestation of God on earth, what you're doing.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
You see what I'm saying? It really, really, really is. And so it's inspiring.
Thank you, man.
Yes, sir. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Wow, this has been a great discussion, guys. I mean, this discussion is going for the ages, and we have many, many more to come. But make sure y'all stay tuned and make sure you subscribe to forbiddenknowledge.tv.
Absolutely.
Get the TV app on your TV, your app store, iOS app store, Google Play, Apple TV, Roku, Samsung, wherever it is in the app store. Look for the Forbidden Knowledge TV app. And don't forget to check out this amazing podcast Thank you, Sharif, man. It's
Thank you. Thank you.
And we do have something I want to give you before we wrap up total, okay? Before we wrap it up. I'm going to give you this. We have our own clothing line. We can stand up now. Just put forward. And this is our esoteric watch line. Regardless of the forbidden esoteric watch line, which falls right in line with, what you guys do. And that's the concept. Oh, yeah, we can take it out of the plastic. Oh, this is powerful. Yeah, that. So we got you, man. A nice watch. Man, it's line. It's you, brother. Appreciate you, man. And we'll take a few photos. We're going to call this one a wrap. Yes. Watch this video for free at www.4bk.tv or download the app on your smartphone, Fire Stick app, Samsung TV, Roku, and other app providers. Join a conscious community that is helping awaken humanity to the forbidden knowledge and a path to a brighter future.